Time for another edition of Out and About with Jamie Grout, and this time around we're talking to local historian Larry Hurto. We've discussed history facts about Newton a couple of times before, but this time he has a book out about facts and history dealing with downtown Newton, and we'll get to that in just a couple moments. But first, a word from our sponsors, including Ryan's Tire and Auto on First Avenue, Newton, who support Dodds Trash Hauling and the Dodds family, who do a great job for the city of Newton. And Ryan's Tire and Auto wants you to know that they love their customers and friends, and they have the great prices, the great service at Ryan's Tire and Auto on First Avenue in Newton. Also, Newton Clinic, if you need care today, they've got you covered at Newton Clinic. They offer same-day appointments and service, and you can give them a call at 641-792-2112. Tony Pesca, IR Realty, give her a call if you're buying or selling a home at 641-417-8484, 641-417-8484. And also by the fine folks at Newton Des Moines East KOA.
It may be cold outside, but spring is right around the corner. It'll soon be time to clean up and clean out. Your trusted Newton KOA handyman service is here to assist with garage organization, home repairs, and yard work. We're giving away a free garage cleanout to one lucky household. Enter the Newton KOA Garage Cleanout giveaway online at newtonkoahandyman.com or the Newton KOA Facebook page. Good luck!
Time for another Out and About with Jamie Grout, and this time, for the third time, we're going to talk to local historian Larry Hurto. Always very interesting talking to Larry, and he has written a book called Newton Main Streets, Stories from Downtown. And Larry, when did downtown Newton get started?
Well, it was a long time ago.
I bet it was.
It certainly was at a time that preceded thee and me. We are actually about 6 months older than Iowa is as a state.
Okay.
The city of Newton was founded as Newton City in 1846, and this may be folklore, an apocryphal type story, but the story is told that as pioneers were making their way west in covered wagons and other such conveyances, that folks were heard to exclaim, "Okay, we've seen the Newton part, now where's the city?" Okay. So they dropped city from the name Newton City to make it simply Newton.
Okay, repeat again. What year was that?
1846.
Okay, we're using that as a trivia question too.
Oh, really?
Okay, yes,
Okay.
1846.
Yeah, well,
okay.
I think it's significant, not very trivial.
Okay, well, now, was there one person or a group of people that deserve credit for this getting started?
Well, yeah, there were commissioners that actually created the city of Newton. And if you go to the Jasper County Historical Museum, you can see framed the document that establishes Newton as Newton City.
Okay. Now, as far as downtown Newton and any kind of commerce is concerned, do you know what the first store was? Was it a general store, that kind of thing? I'm thinking of Mr. Drucker on Petticoat Junction or Green Acres.
Frank Cady, right?
Yeah, somebody like that. Yeah, good old Frank Cady.
Well, we have from the 1850 census. So by that point, the city would have been about 4 years old. It's the child is beginning to walk and so on. But the 1850 census showed that there were no less than 5 blacksmiths.
Oh, is that right?
In Newton. So far and away, if you ever needed a horse shod or anything having to do with the mechanical arts, why Newton was the place to come. But I think that there was one general store, a general merchant by the name of John H. Franklin.
Okay.
And he shows up in the 1850 U.S. federal census as well.
Okay. So was there a point where Newton's downtown area really started to grow? Was it the 1920s? perhaps?
Oh, I would put it earlier than that.
Okay.
Obviously, we being Iowans, everything economically was agriculturally based.
Sure.
And so from 1846, I would say up to about the year 1890, our economy was driven by things agricultural. F.L. Maytag, as you know, had grown up a few miles north of the city of Newton on a farm, but he came to the city, and the 1880 census shows him working at a store that sold agricultural implements. He eventually became a partner in that store, and then in 1893 he got together with two of his brothers-in-law. Remember, Mr. Maytag married Miss Dina Bergman from Malacca Township, and two of her brothers, Gus and Will, became partners with Maytag and a young man by the name of George W. Parsons in a company that was called the Parsons Band Cutter and Self Feeder
Sure.
Company, 1893. This was an attachment to threshing machines that fed the grain through this device into the wagons. People had gathered grain by hand and banded it together, and then when they inserted it into this self-feeding machine, that machine would cut the bands and feed the grain then through the device into the wagon that was waiting to be loaded. So starting about 1890, we began to see industry coming in and factories and foundries.
And that brought jobs, and so that brought housing, and that brought a better economy, and so more business to downtown Newton.
Exactly, well put. And during that earlier period, there were times of economic unrest in the country. There was a panic in 1873, another one in 1893. So really, it wasn't until after the turn of the 20th century that things really took off, and it was during that decade of the 1920s, the Roaring '20s, that things really took off here in Newton.
Took off like the Charleston.
There you go. The population almost doubled during that period of time, and of course, we both know that come October of 1929, the stock market crashed, and the economy began to go south thereafter. But the population of Newton was strong and well established by that point, thanks to the forward thinking of people like F.L. Maytag, the Bergmans, and George Parsons.
Fantastic. So how did downtown Newton hold up during the Depression?
Well, it struggled all throughout the course of the decade of the 30s. I would say that it continued to be felt as late as 1939. And of course, that is when war broke out in Europe. We didn't get involved until 2 years after that. But the Depression was a worldwide thing. We think of Germany, for example, and after they had lost the Great War in 1918, and the Weimar Republic was trying to break away from a monarchy in that country, unemployment was just rampant. And of course, you had all of the returning veterans, some of them who had been wounded, coming back, and it was just a disaster for the German economy. So I'm not an economist, but you do see in history, periodically, we have these financial even calamities that come into play that affect the lives of the citizenry.
Sure. How about downtown Newton in World War II times? A lot of people went off to war, and I'm sure a lot of people pitched in, though, for the war effort.
Well, they certainly did. And one of the more interesting displays that I've already mentioned, the Jasper County Museum, that can be seen over there celebrates when they brought women into into working in the plant because so many of the men were away fighting fascism.
And can I jump in here real quick? Didn't Maytag make airplanes or airplane parts or something like that during World War II?
Yes, that's right. And that was mandated by Uncle Sam.
Oh, okay.
Production of washing machines was shut down. I guess the thinking must have been that the warehouses were sufficiently full. And so they were directed to, as you indicated, make parts for the military. Parts for airplanes, parts for machine guns, that kind of thing. And you'll see at the Jasper County Museum a display related to that. And they have several of these parts on display, and cast into every one of them is the Maytag logo.
Oh, that's neat.
So you can see that there. But we actually know the names of the first two women who went to work in the Maytag factory.
Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, right. And they were two women from Colfax.
Well, that's
neat. Yeah, our neighbors 10 miles to the west get a little recognition here.
That's fantastic. So, since a lot of the men were off to war and women pitched in for the war effort, did downtown Newton survive during World War II pretty well?
Well, it did. I think it held its own very, very well. As with other places, when the veterans returned home, I understand that housing was something of a problem. People finding places to live, and so it took some time to get back to unqualified prosperity, let's say. And I think by the decade of the 1950s, we were beginning to see that. It was after the war that the city dads, and they were all dads in those days, began to recognize that physical improvements probably should start to be made of our downtown. A lot of the existing buildings, for example, on both on the north and the south sides of the square, those buildings date from the 1880s. And on the west side, that's where the oldest buildings are that comprise Newton's downtown. They date from the 1870s. And the very oldest of those buildings would be the Masonic Temple.
Oh, sure.
Building, which was completed in 1870.
Oh, I didn't know that far back.
And then on the east side of the square, where the Hotel Maytag is, historic Hotel Maytag, the Capitol Theater, and the Jewel Building, those are the newest properties in Newton.
Really? Okay.
The Jewel Building dates from about 1917, and the Hotel Maytag wasn't built until 1926.
Now, the Jewel Building, doesn't that relate to the Jewel department stores in Chicago?
Well, it was the Jewel Tea business.
Okay.
The Jewel Tea Company, they made things like, I'm trying to think of what the word is that I'm looking for.
Tea?
Well, they made tea, but they made condiments and things like that, okay?
Sure.
Flavoring extracts,
okay.
Let's say, those kinds of things.
I see.
But there is a connection between a man named Frank P. Ross, who was a Newton man.
Okay.
that was involved in the founding of the Jewel Tea Company, as was Mr. Skiff.
Oh,
The Skiff family.
of the Skiff Hospital,
Right.
which is now Mercy One.
Yeah, Vernon W. Skiff gave the monies for the hospital in honor of his wife, Mary Frances.
Ah, okay. Who the hospital was named after.
Mary Frances Skiff Memorial Hospital.
I don't want to get away from downtown Newton, but wasn't after World War II the time period that the city fathers decided that there needed to be more housing in Newton, and that's how Aurora Heights came about? That's what I think I had heard from my father at one time.
Well, and I think he'd be closer to it than I ever would be. My family didn't move here until 1956.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that makes sense. But the city fathers determined that they were going to celebrate 100 years of Newton, not in 1946, which would have been, I think, more appropriate, but they chose 1957.
Oh, it was a big deal, wasn't it?
Because that was 100 years after the city of Newton had been incorporated, when we had our first mayor, we had our first city council, and so on. And so the city dads determined we need to kind of spruce up for that. And plus, it will send the message to people across the state that we are an up-and-coming city. That we are progressive, and so the ethic that we see on the Newton Square today is what an architectural ethic that is called mid-century modern. And again, having come here in 1956, that's all that I've known architecturally around the square.
Sure.
And if you look on the north side of the square on North 2nd Avenue, you can see how linear those buildings are. They use that blonde brick. Those are both characteristics of the mid-century modern movement. And again, having grown up with that, I guess I can't get too overly excited about it, but you know what? It was that ethic that landed our downtown as an historic district on the National Register of Historic Places in 2014. So you know what? Anything that will give recognition to our good city, I'm all for, and so I'll certainly endorse that look that we have in our downtown now.
Let's talk about the Hotel Maytag for a moment. When I was a kid, it was the Hotel Maytag. Then it became the Midtown Hotel. Now it's back to the Hotel Maytag.
Right.
The restaurant, when I was a kid, was the coffee shop. Then it became the Midtown Cafe.
Right.
Now it's the April's. I understand at one time, it was so fancy that even the sidewalks were heated. FL Maytag makes sure that they were heated, so in the wintertime, any snow and ice on it would melt. It was one of the first places that was air conditioned. Now, are all these things true?
Jamie, I have to confess to you, I've never heard that about the sidewalks.
Okay.
That's
a new one on you?
Yeah. Well, talk about innovation. My gosh.
Well, I mean, I would leave it to FL Maytag to come up with stuff like that, because, and he had some engineers who were pretty bright.
He sure did. You think of people like Howard Snyder,
right,
and later Tom Smith, and so on. But yeah, the air conditioning addition is in fact, it was installed in 1935, and it was reported to be the first hotel west of the Mississippi to have air conditioning.
Yeah.
So that again is a feather in our caps.
Yeah, my first ride in an elevator was at the Hotel Maytag.
And they had bellmen, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty fancy schmancy for Newton, Iowa.
Elevator operators.
Yeah.
But remember, Maytag had this built because there were traveling salesmen forever coming to town to turn in their orders, to take a look at new product and so on, and they had to have a place for those folks to stay, and he wanted them to have the very best.
Now, is it on the National Register of Historic Places?
Yes,
Okay.
it is, as part of the historic downtown
What
district.
about the swimming pool at Maytag Park?
That was also opened in 1935. As I recall, the intent was for the ribbon cutting, the dedication, whatever you want to call it, to be done on Labor Day. But I think I remember reading that it stormed, it rained.
Oh, is that
so
right?
They had to move it back. I'm thinking September 8th is when they finally did that.
You know who gave the speech at the dedication?
Well, Mr. Maytag was there, of course, but the real highlight, and I think this is I guess we can call it a bit of trivia, that I think the person that really drew the interest of those who attended was WHO sports broadcaster Ronald Reagan.
Yes, otherwise known as Dutch.
Dutch Reagan.
That's right.
Coming
Yes.
to Newton, Iowa, former president,
And
future president of the United States.
And I'm working at WHO right now.
Yeah.
And you walk around the building, and there's all these pictures of Ronald Reagan. Boy, they play on that a lot.
Yeah.
You bet. Yeah.
Well, he certainly had a lot of personality.
Yeah, he did.
And I just think everybody, his voice was soothing. He always had a smile on his face, and
Do you want to hear my Ronald Reagan impersonation, Larry?
well, go ahead. Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I hope your listeners are ready.
Okay.
Maybe we should ask them to take a seat. Or
Okay,
something.
here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well. Okay, that's it. Well.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, moving right along here. Any other facts you want to pass along about downtown Newton that you think might be interesting? I mean, it's modern day. There's a lot of your book. Yeah, go ahead and tell us some more about it.
All right. Well.
We got a few more minutes left.
Okay.
There used to be Jasper County Savings Bank in downtown Newton. There's a park there now.
Right.
And the bank has moved back.
That's right. It's now a U.S. bank.
Mm-hmm.
But these stories that I collected for stories from downtown, I began to write in 2017 when I was a member of the board of directors of the Newton Main Street organization. And I would hope that at least some of your listeners are familiar with the Main Street America program. In fact, the program in Iowa is very strong. There are over 50 cities in the state of Iowa that are part of the program, and actually Colfax became a Main Street, Iowa community before Newton did.
Good for them.
So we actually have in Jasper County 2 Main Street programs. So in 2016, 2017, I was on the board of directors of the Main Street organization, and I began to write these stories about downtown businesses and properties, and who the personalities were that generated those businesses. And the articles originally appeared in the Newton Main Street newsletter, which was a tabloid type publication that was part of what was then the Newton Daily News. And that newsletter was called The Hub. And so 4 of those articles are articles that I wrote for The Hub. And then when The Hub ceased to be, the articles became part of the Newton Main Street section of Jasper County Living magazine, which I believe goes to every household in the city of Newton. So yeah, there are stories of some businesses that I think your listeners will remember. The J.C. Penney Company, Larchwood Florist, for example, but yet we have other businesses that go all the way back to 1858. William H. Huff came to Newton from Loudoun County, Virginia, and the Huff family had grocery and variety stores in Newton until 1956. And some will remember the A.M. Huff and Sons stores on the southwest corner of the square. And the reason that those finally closed in 1956 is they said it was a parking consideration.
Oh.
But more especially, I think the family thought that it was the advent of supermarkets coming to Newton that cost the family-owned grocery business to wane.
And I see you have a picture of Santon's grocery store that is downtown. Now, maybe when you and I grew up, it had moved to where the American Legion is now, because I remember I lived about 2 blocks away from there. If my mom needed bread or whatever the case may be, I'd pedal my bike down there and had a basket on the front, and I'd get my mom whatever she needed and ride back with it. But
opposite of Maytag Park.
Right, opposite of, and Riley's gas station was right across the street
Riley
from there.
Van Zee.
Yeah, that's right. It's a convenience store now. But was Santon's grocery store in downtown Newton for quite a while? Do you know, Larry?
Yes, and it actually was started by 3 Santon brothers.
Oh, it was? Because I remember Tom Santon.
Yeah, and let's see, there was Jack and Joe and one they called Doc.
Okay.
And so yeah, I think Tom was
one of the brothers,
one of the younger generation.
And then I think his son Dick took over for a while. One of his sons, Doug, went to school with me, and he's a veterinarian now out in Colorado, I believe.
Yeah. When they were on the square, they were on the northwest corner of the square.
By Bond Clothing Company.
Yeah, and there again is another business. Mr. Bond came to Newton from Reesner and began to work in clothing stores on the square. And some of your listeners, I think, will remember a guy by the name of Ron McFerrin.
Sure, I remember Ron McFerrin.
W.R. McFerrin. He came here from Villisca, Iowa.
Oh, where the axe murders happened.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, what a claim to fame.
Yeah.
But I think in about 1946, he bought the controlling interest of the Bond Clothing Company, and ran it until he passed away in the 1980s.
I remember Fred Wickland, who worked there also.
Worked there for a long time.
His daughter Darcy graduated with me.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Right. So yeah, there's a mention of a lot of places on the square that I think readers will recognize, but I've also made it a point to tell stories of some businesses that aren't particularly well known. Obviously, Newton Main Street would want us to celebrate the dreams and aspirations and the successes of a lot of these businesses, but Jamie, I'll tell you, we have 2 or 3 stories in there that feature some tragedy.
Oh.
Things don't always go as planned.
Like when downtown Newton was whitewashed?
Yeah.
You might remember that, Larry.
I do remember that. In fact, I think that we were allowed to take off from school to go help undo the whitewashing to the storefronts. This was some kind of an antic, I think, having to do with homecoming.
Yeah, I remember my dad taking me downtown and seeing it. I couldn't believe what had happened.
Yeah, and I don't know whether they ever did pin that on anybody, that anybody was made to pay.
But there was tragedy in downtown Newton? People had died or
Well, I have a story, and you would be interested in this, you being a former projectionist and ticket taker at the Capitol Theater.
Oh, right. Well, there was a fire or something?
Well, there was a man named M.B. Huckins, and he, for a time, ran the first silent movie house in Newton, Iowa, on the north side of the square. It was called the Electric.
Okay.
And that was in 1907. And remember, we're talking about silent pictures then, so any sound that was had to be provided by musicians, vocalists, pianists, organists. Well, M.B. Huckins was so successful that he opened up a second theater on the east side of the square, right on the alley, on the opposite side from where the Capitol is now.
Okay.
Called the Lyric. And that was in 1908. It was there for 2 years, and then it moved to the west side of the square, where the coffee house is now.
Okay.
And from 1910 until 1923, it was on the west side of the square. So it had a pretty long-running time. Well, about 1912, Mr. Huckins actually left Newton for Hollywood.
Oh.
And we're told that he bought and renovated and improved theaters and then sold them, but that he actually also directed some movies.
Oh.
And unfortunately, his career was cut short. He was hit by an automobile in Los Angeles in 1919.
Oh, wow.
And that was the end of it. Another part of the story that's very interesting is he had a very talented young woman named Mabel Livingston. Was a great vocalist, a pianist, an organist, and she hired on with him from 1909 to 1911 as a musician for his theaters. And she came well qualified. She had been with the Chase Lister company that was out of Newton, Iowa, that traveled all over the Midwest doing shows. Well, so Mabel worked for Mr. Huckins for a couple of years, and then she left his employ and also her second husband to go to New York to break into films.
Okay.
And M.B. Huckins found at least one film that we know of that he received some publicity, and there in one of these publicity stills was Mabel, easily recognizable. And he said, well, I'm going to try and get Mabel's film. Well, guess what? She follows Huckins out to California and dies of the Spanish flu.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, there's some
tragedy
connected with some of these stories. And that's just one of them. I don't want to spill all the beans because this is a fundraising project for the Newton Main Street organization. Okay. And we hope that folks will be interested and try to find a copy.
And how can people find a copy, Larry?
They are readily available at Forbes Office Solutions.
Okay.
On the northeast corner of the square.
Okay.
But also they could contact Aaron Yeager, who is the director of, the executive director of Newton Main Street.
Okay, and how can they contact Aaron about that?
And the phone number is 641-791-9617.
Okay.
And let me tell you, the response to the book has really been very, very good.
Good,
I'm told
good.
that more than half of the printing run has been sold already.
Oh, great.
So,
Fantastic. Are you asking for any kind of specific donation or just whatever?
No, we asked for $20 a copy.
Okay.
And again, that's a fundraiser for the Newton Main Street organization.
All right. And what does that money go to with Main Street?
Well, it is an economic development initiative. So Main Street works with folks to try to fill vacant storefronts to help bring new businesses to the community.
Okay, great.
But there is also an historic preservation component to the Main Street program. And so Main Street tries to encourage that folks as they move into some of these old properties.
Sure.
And again, we talked about how old the various properties are on the various sides of the square, that they will be friendly to helping to
Fix them up.
preserve the historic integrity of the building if that is a fact.
And I don't know if you've heard or seen, but at Rotary a few weeks ago, the gentleman who has purchased the old Montgomery wards is trying to fix that up and make it into something real nice too. So that's fantastic, and I think that's progress in motion, so that should be good.
Jerry Schwaller and his wife Rachel certainly have put forth good effort in that, and they have received assistance from Newton Main Street in that project.
Larry, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for chatting with us today on Out and About with Jamie Grout. And don't forget to get a copy of the book. Get a hold of Aaron at Main Street. Take care, Larry.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for having me.
This podcast has also been sponsored by Halo Branded Solutions representative Lynette Baker, Free Classified Weekly, Westside Java Coffee Bar, and the gang at Park Center in Newton. They want you to know that you can make your loved one's day by enrolling them in Willowbrook, a Wesley Life Adult Day Center. Willowbrook on the Park Center campus provides a welcoming and stimulating environment that allows participants to maintain independence while receiving support and encouragement. Social engagement, companionship, and enriching opportunities are provided to give participants a purposeful and fulfilling day. Willowbrook's person-centered care includes exercise focused on total health and well-being and programming that includes music therapy, pet therapy, guest speakers, outings, and much more. If you'd like to learn more about Willowbrook, call 641-791-4500 to arrange a tour. And, of course, everyone, including Jeff Holshoe at Advantage Credit Union.
My bank is always charging me fees.
My loan rates are through the roof.
Sound like someone you know? You should tell them it's time to break up with their bank and find a much better match. Advantage Credit Union offers great rates, no minimum checking balance, and no monthly service fees. Plus, refer a friend to ACU this February for a chance to win a 55-inch Samsung TV.
I found my happily ever after with Advantage Credit Union.
No purchase payment or donation required to win. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. Federally insured by NCUA.
Until next time, out is out. See ya.